out of that? About? Yeah, give her the microphone. About?
We were just about getting into a heated discussion about new discoveries and referencing and teaching and learning. Yeah.
Okay, so what was it in particular in Moshe's talking or stories that, you know, evoked that?
Probably the fact that he said, I stole all this information from people and they stole it from me. So it's not the ownership and authorisation of knowledge through codified systems where if you don't tick the right box, you fail.
Slow down a little bit? I can't make a distinction out of those words. You
That's,
went...
I did. I know. That he didn't claim to own it. What he knew, he found information. Martina said he didn't reference things and go, oh, I got this research from here and that research from there.
He did.
But Jana pointed out that actually he did, but he really shared it very freely. And so if you're lying on the ground and somebody's talking you through that while you're doing a movement, because of the tone of his voice and the speed of his speaking, you can actually find a lot more freedom to move your body. And you've got a lot more options because somebody is talking to you about how they did that in a nice, conversational, gentle way.
Okay, so generalising the attention to include the stories, to include the listening, maybe shifted how we focus, how intently we focus, which of course brings in our habits of attention. Thank you. Generalising attention.
Sorry, like the generalising attention, how does that link into the ownership of the ideas? Like, is that, do you mean you're being manipulated by being in this state of exploring and open attention, and then he's bringing in, like, I don't get the link between this and the ownership of ideas.
Neither.
I think maybe they're separate.
Yes.
Sorry. Okay, they were separate. Okay.
They might be for you, but in my experience, they're actually connected because that's just how my system.
Well, you could connect them, and I think within what was said, somebody thought he stole ideas and didn't give the what's the word you used? Reference, which he actually did. But then what he was talking about later in the today's part was about his assistants who stole his ideas, or he stole their ideas. And in a way, he's being paradoxical. You know, is it stealing? He talks about it's creating. That out of these possibilities, they're developing what they think is their own ideas because they don't remember that in a particular ATM when they learnt the relationship or where the seed was embedded. So there's that aspect of ownership that he was talking about. And in terms of his work and development in relationship to other thinkers of his time, he references that often. And you'll learn, you'll hear that more and more, especially as you read his material. Anna?
I feel that they link in the sense that his overall spiel was about approaches to knowledge, to me. So you can have many approaches to knowledge and many ways of feeling superior or not superior or equal within that. And then while he's telling you that, he's creating an environment that gives you a new approach to knowledge in learning at the same time. So you're learning in your body in a new way that, or a different way, or any scenario could create a different environment that you might not be used to approaching in that way. Like maybe you're used to going to yoga class and told exactly what to do, and if you don't align exactly, then that's not whatever. Do you know what I mean? So then he's talking about this overall approach to knowledge while he's playing with yours, in my mind.
Thank you.
I think your discussion is an interesting one, because that point really stuck out to me as well, because he also says, you know, as well as everything you just described, he said at one point, sometimes his assistants or sometimes people do have original ideas and they tell him about them, but he doesn't reflect back to them that that was an original idea and he's going to go and use it. And I found that quizzical to me, that he wouldn't actually give that feedback when, as he, by his own words, by his own description, he's often bored by what people tell him because they're telling him stuff he already knows. So,
did anybody hear it differently?
Yeah, I heard him saying that when you've been, this is what I interpreted, when you've grown up in a culture where everything's been sort of you've had a lot of stuff spoon-fed to you through education, say, and then you find out you can have an original idea, you might be really excited, but he knows that we can all have original ideas every day, so he's not as excited, and he might not even bother to mention, yes, you had an original idea, because that's just like 6 I had before breakfast.
Fiona? Just interested to hear how you heard it differently.
It's really the same way. Yeah, that he was saying, I'm not really, I don't get surprised. Or he thought it was funny that people were still getting surprised that they could have an original idea. Yeah.
Suhani next.
And the reason why we got a bit into a heated discussion was because I was saying, you know, I noticed coming from Austria, when I was, like, for instance, studying in Australia, that original ideas weren't actually welcome, that our teaching system actually suppresses original ideas. And that's when we started getting into a heated discussion, because everything has to be referenced and everything has to come back to some other so-called original ideas. So where does the originality come in? And that's when we just got into it, discussed that point.
My take on, or what I took away from when he was talking about the ideas and superiority, is just basically that he was sitting back, amused, I guess, that he can see that he knows that he's superior, and he's still amused that others still are being surprised by their discoveries, when I guess what I was taking from him is, you know, if you're going through this journey, then not to say nothing will surprise you, but sort of the bottom line is that there are so many options. So he's bored, I guess, hearing people saying there's options when you should know that there are so many options, if that makes sense. It was kind of what he said to me, sort of really empowered anyone with any type of need or a special need, because basically what he was saying is it really shouldn't surprise you that there are so many options. You can be superior. That's...
Moshe had quite an ego, but he also had the ability to perturb others in a way that made them look at themselves. So he would say, I'm superior, but he could also be as humble. He has the possibility of a huge spectrum. And maybe by saying he's superior, it gets people to look at their own ego. Why do they need to say they created something? You know, is that important to them?
I feel like often when I hear him, he's just really being evocative. Like every chance he gets, he's just evoking and challenging like the perceptions you hold. And with Simon's comment, like I could sort of feel, for me, that sense of him, you know, being in a position where people admire him, or like even, you know, they want to learn, they're eager to learn from him, and then there's for me this sense of, he's in a position where he's got some sense of care, like he should have some sense of care, responsibility or something, and that sense of not giving appropriate feedback maybe falls into the idea that he's neglecting that sense of care. But I guess what he's doing is like he's just challenging that role, that perception of that role. Like, I'm not your teacher, like you are on your own, and I'm here to have a dialogue with you, but like, be brave, be bold, and just like, I'm not accepting this role that you put on me. I'm not accepting this sense of I'm leading you, you are leading yourself, sort of thing. Like, but it's really hard in some way, because there is like this want for someone to be caring, or like it is a sense of really strong care in some way, I think, because he knows what is necessary. Like, I think he'll give the support that is necessary if someone like really struggles, but like he won't give any more. Like, he won't get it anymore, because then you're reliant on it, and he doesn't want that reliance.
Yeah.
Like,
every time I hear him give us stories, or rant and rave and so on and so forth, amongst everything, the question that I have is, the question that he seems to provoke in me is, what is the meaning of such a thing to me? Is knowledge something that can only be passed on from someone else to me? Then I define it as knowledge. If I discover something myself, do I not accept it as knowledge? Or what does superiority to someone or inferior to someone means to me? I think it seems to me that he wants to make you think that the underlying meaning of these things, because once you have defined the meaning of these terms to yourself, then your perspective and hence your actions will totally change. Say, for example, if knowledge suddenly is just a discovery, regardless where it comes from, whether or not it is from books, internet, or you just discover yourself, is still recognized as knowledge, then I think you will probably have a much stronger sense of empowerment rather than having to rely on someone else to feed you that knowledge. So to me, all this rant and rave, and I think he did do that, is really trying to provoke us to think the underlying meaning of what these things are to us individually.
Any comment about the habits? You?
No, good. Actually, I think it was what you were saying, so I'll probably hand it on to you. But what I was brought to mind was of my experience with my Qigong teacher, who I learnt from by watching, because she didn't speak much English. And she got very frustrated with her Western clients. Maybe she would treat a cancer patient, and as soon as they started to experience the improvement, the cancer would shrink, they'd throw away their practice. And we had a conversation about cultural differences of, I'm not sure if it's the same as habit, but having maybe discipline's another word, that distinction between maybe blind routine, or routine that's been imposed by somebody else, or something else which you would describe to be, related to longevity. Go on, say a bit about that.
I was just a bit perplexed, because I was saying that my grandparents both lived, granddad 104 and passed away in his sleep, really hale and healthy, but I was a bit confused because he had really set, disciplined routines. Get up at 5, meditate, and he'd have his half a cup of coffee. Was so regimented. Go walk for 5 kilometres, a day, 5 to 10 kilometres. So I was a bit confused because he wasn't necessarily exploring, out of his routine. But having said that, obviously he got knocked over by a motor vehicle, and so then he was on a walker, so he was still able to I suppose, maintain his self-discipline or routines. But I was a bit confused in terms of, habit or...
Oh, I don't need the microphone. So I think Moshe is asking you to question. He's using all these stories to help you see, find the things that you never question in your life, to evoke your capacity to learn, to free yourself with your habits, to empower you to develop more choices in life. It's not about this. So what's right or comfortable or easy for one person is different for another. And one aspect that, admittedly it was yesterday and you may not have seen the relevance of it, but the talk about Speransky, and I'll direct you to an article in a moment, but Moshe's work was hugely influenced by this man Speransky, who studied, coming back to your point, studied pathology. What is pathology? What is health? How can we define it? And what he discovered was that no individual, no system responds to an irritant or a perturbation in the same way at different times. So not the same individual, nor two different individuals. And that's why what works for somebody doesn't necessarily work for somebody else. We can hold the hope that it will and follow it accordingly, but maybe it does or maybe it doesn't. So we're trying to free these unseen restrictions that we hold on our thinking and our actions, so that we become freer in our choices and more able to do what we want and live fuller and more meaningful lives, because we're continually emerging. We're continually creating ourselves. And I bring up Speransky because I have the book, never read the book, thought I might need to answer a question on it, so that was a thing that I sort of got interested in. And the thinking is really dense, really conceptual. It's not a book that I would recommend you to necessarily read now as being the most important reference, but down the track to see where... got it. Down the track. The influences on Moshe's thinking, which he really does own and acknowledge, it can be quite useful. And Jenny is going to put up a link on the website. Done. She's already done it. To there's a series of articles by one of the earlier Feldenkrais trainers, Dennis Leary. And he did one particularly, it's number 12 of the articles, about Speransky's work. Moshe talks about him in Body and Mature Behaviour and his take on the method. That article I read 4 times. I've read 4 or 5 times. Still, it's, dense. But basically it's about, we are a system as a whole. Our state is always changing. And Speransky was formative in anticipating current thinking on disease, health, systems thinking, how the state is influenced, the state of the system is influenced by the part, and the whole of the system, the state influences, the part influences the whole influences the part, and that they're all independent and emergent in their properties. Could talk more about that, but I think when you're interested, the articles are there. There's one on the Weber-Fechner use of effort, and we had Dennis as a trainer in our training. I didn't understand a word he said. Wasn't my way of learning, but he totally fried my brain. So something came out of it, even though I didn't understand it. There was a shift. So I do think his articles are fantastic, really interesting. Nicole, doing a microphone?
Just on that, I suppose we touched on that as a group. You just mentioned society, and this stuff is all about us even just being aware that we've got options, I suppose, and in a way we're not necessarily encouraged to think like that, the way that we're educated. And so in a sense maybe we were wondering what society would be like if we were all fully fledged Feldenkrais practitioners, and maybe there would be an element of chaos there, so maybe it's got something to do with the way that there's a bit of control in society. And
Moshe wondered that a lot.
Yeah.
And hoped for that a lot.
A bit more chaos. Yeah.
Well, the freedom within the rules, freedom that people actually question them, and then for harmonious living in a society, there is some need for boundaries, guidelines, but that we can, instead of accepting them blindly, we can question them so that we can choose to follow or not follow. Yona first.
I guess I suspect that he didn't get all of this, like, different approaches to things out of thin air, that, he lived in a lot of different places in the world through his life, and, even within this room, like, a lot of people would have grown up thinking differently and learning things differently, and I think even in an ideal world of everyone being Feldy, it would still be largely different, like it wouldn't be similar. And I think I often go back to what I learnt with Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander studies of different approaches to knowledge, but it's, it just opened me up to the fact that I'd never thought like that. Mm-hmm. That there are different ways of thinking, and that everyone can be equal, and knowledge doesn't have to be owned, or, it can be approached differently or whatever. But there is so many more, like, I know now just from that little learning that knowledge doesn't have to be, and I just assume that he came across through his learnings with other people all of these ideas that there's not one, like, ideal, like, Feldy way. At the end we'll still all just be our bobbling weirdo selves. And
I think part of what he was saying there, I'm not sure if I'm going to preempt you, Uncle, or not, but was that at a certain level we are very similar, and our learning is very similar. Different depending what environment we grow up with, but in terms of our organic learning to use ourselves, the possibilities of our structure, and relating to gravity and those sorts of organic actions that get us upright in the world, and towards that further the social development, the academic development, or whatever it goes, when we're in the more universal human functions, you could say, did he say primitive? Yes. He used the word primitive, that we are more alike than we perhaps like to think. But once you start taking into account religious influences and social influences and academic learning, then there's a much higher variation and possibility for each one of us, and that we start to become less alike. So we're never going to be identical in that in those, how our experiences have formed us in very different ways.
I guess with the idea of exploring options, and through that maybe shifting boundaries or rules, I can understand that there is a fear maybe of what follows that. But I think it does, the thing that makes me trust it a lot is the fact that it's not a random dissolution of boundaries. It's not a random dissolution of just like letting yourself just be flowing with whatever influences come, but it's done with awareness, and the awareness, like training, gives you the ability to choose. So it is looking at, what else is out there, but it doesn't need to be scary, because you can then sort of form an ability that you can trust to make a choice that maybe is making a mistake as well or something, but there is a connection. It's not just random chaos for me. And I think that links into some innate quality of like goodness and evil and stuff, but I think there is that awareness helps to direct that. Yeah.
Thank you.
I think sometimes it's very difficult to know what you don't know. I think that's what it often boils down to. And like Feldenkrais said, our brain is, that's how we distinguish ourselves to animals or mammals, that our brain is meant to think, to learn. And how often don't we take the opportunity, like even, you read a book and you find a word and you don't actually know what the word means, but you don't look the meaning up. I think we are maybe just inherently lazy to... I remember it also at uni with English being my second language, I sometimes didn't understand a word, and I used to ask first my colleagues around, what does this and that mean? They said, I don't know. And then I put my hand up and said, what does that word mean? And I was just like, shush, Martina, let the lecturer get on with it. So my curiosity was there, but I was shut up and no one around me knew the word either. But no one was interested what it means. And then, it distorts the concept of your learning. So I think we are just maybe very lazy to learn.
Well,
and explore.
I'd say that your environment...
It is provocative,
your environment, through your environment, it's a great example, actually, that if people have told you, oh, I don't know, and they seem not to care, and you feel that you've been shut down by them by asking, and your enthusiasm to know was not appreciated, so you close down to that, then that can become a habit that you may never question till today.
Yeah, I'm inherently stubborn and want to know, but lots of people...
Well, it may not be... I think it's a generalisation to say inherently lazy, That's a judgment and perhaps a projection on their action. But what you do have the capacity to look at and change is yourself. To notice, and sometimes we don't even need to know what was the originator of the behaviour, but simply to question. If you can catch that moment, am I shutting up because I'm considering that I speak a lot, or because I want to think about it for myself, or I'm shutting up because I daren't say something, or because I'm afraid of something? So you actually start to pause and say, is this something I do always? Can I do it a little differently? Can I do it differently in one context? Then maybe I can try it out in another context, so that you start to develop choice about saying or not saying, asking or not asking. And this is the fluid boundaries. Sometimes we make mistakes. We're human. Sometimes others don't have the patience to accept that we're humans, and that it takes time to see that our intention was, and other people do, to see that our intention was well-meaning. So that it's a whole complex environment of influences and actions and possibilities, that where it's so easy to get into do it this way or do it that way because I always did. And Moshe's really asking you to question that for yourselves, to think up ways that you can question in different contexts.
But you even look at it, when we were with children who are 3 or 4, who ask why, when, where, and how often do we really answer it? And I think that's where initially the curiosity
so I don't
and
think
the
you
asking.
I don't think you can speak for everyone.
Of course, you can't
So-
generalize, but
But yes, it is, has been.
just listen in the supermarket when a little kid asks, "Mum, what's this?" "I don't know." That's it.
And
I'll be
there-
quiet.
And there are many other mums in the world that will take the time, sit down. Oh, you want to explore this little. Oh, look, you're pointing at the pedal, or there's the dirt, or.
And it's contextual as well.
Yeah.
When you've got 5 minutes and you've got to get to an appointment versus at home, you know, in a
Yes.
comfortable environment.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah. All mothers get irrational at times.
I've been a kinder teacher, so I know how much people just...
Yeah. Simon and back to Anka.
I'm taking a leaf out of your book, coming over to you. My family and my experience is completely different to that, and people were completely stimulated by words and always asking and relating about them and looking. I used to carry a dictionary around when I was like 15 years old and used to get into trouble for it because I was so stimulated. So that's a side thing. Just this thing about habit and what would it be like if everyone was, you know, a Feldenkrais practitioner and walking around and the chaos and all of that. And I think the other side of it is, I think the opportunity through being flexible in thinking would bypass so much of the trouble that we encounter as societies, where there is inflexibility in thinking and people, through the inflexibility, being challenged by different scenarios or different people or different ideas, and then therefore responding out of fear or out of
habit.
Well, the habit of the inflexibility. Yeah. So I think that again, this challenge of drinking your grapefruit juice in the evening and just identifying habits and breaking out of them and having the possibility to do things in a different way, I think it's a really exciting idea in terms of as a people being flexible and having options.
Anka, did you want to?
In mind, comes to my mind is Moshe saying, talking about the capacity to choose, gaining the capacity to make a choice which is different from freedom of choice. And this is wonderful knowledge that we're sharing. And Moshe at his time, knew Margaret Mead and people like Speransky. They learnt from others. They did use those forms of academic responsibility. And, we've moved on because of people like that to contemporary neuroscience, which I think there are now increasingly accessible ways to. And I'm really glad that we try to encompass, I don't call it rigid, I call it disciplined approaches with a flexible mentality as well. So to somehow draw the experiential and find this language for sharing that with perhaps things that have a longer tradition and convention, like Eastern disciplines or academic approaches to knowledge. It's all about increasing our capacity to make a choice rather than maybe what could be quite disastrous, a sort of anarchic, I'm not saying it would be, but that's different from letting it all hang out, I think.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
I just wanted to make a quick comment, and it's going back to children, because I've got an 8-year-old and 6-year-old, and it's quite, and Moshe talks so much about food, and it's, I think, tea time. So my 8-year-old, usually I'll give them a glass of milk because the school luckily provides them with food, but then, as a mum, you feel guilty. Oh, you could have a proper breakfast before going to school. And she's like, but I'm not hungry. Why are you forcing me to eat? Why can't I eat when I'm hungry? And I'm like, and I go, fair point. Like, I don't know, but society conditions you that you must eat before you leave the house. But it's, so it's just amazing having these little beings in your house that question these, perturb what society tells you to do. And as a, thinking I'm such a terrible mum, I'm giving them a glass of milk. but that's what they want. They want to eat, and they're happy with that, and they want to eat at, morning tea time. So that's one instance. And then the little one is constantly exploring. So it's cucumbers. She goes, can I have maple syrup on cucumber? And I'm like, really? And she's like, yeah. Or exploring with spicy pickles and jam and eating that with rice. And I'm like, we sort of, as we get older, I think, lose that ability to just be curious and explore and just, you know what I mean? Like just... Or that a tube is like a, I don't know, vacuum cleaner or, just that. So it's quite interesting. I suppose it's good that Moshe, he uses a lot of that early developmental or being children to hopefully help us maybe get back to being curious and inventive or creative or whatever you want to call it. But I had to comment because he was talking about drinking grapefruit juice at night and whatever. I was like, I have to come out and...
Thank you. Anka, is it still, you would like? No? Okay. So that was great. Thank you. Let's take a break. 15 minutes.